Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Keith Cottrell joins us from New York City, where he is Vice President of Operations for Electronic Environments New York. Keith and I have known each other since the early 2000s when he was working with Jeff Hoover at Audio Advisors in West Palm Beach, Florida, who was CEDIA president and one of my columnists for my previous magazine at the time. Keith had become the director of operations for Audio Advisors and started volunteering for CEDIA education. And around that time, we developed a friendship. And then later, as he left Audio Advisors and moved back to the New York City area around 2008, Keith reached out to me about writing a series of articles for my magazine on project management. Eventually, I left the New York City area, not because of Keith, mind you, but for family reasons. And other than through Facebook, we basically lost touch for a while as Keith then also left the industry and I switched publications. Now he's back working as a residential integrator again. And we crossed paths recently at the HTSA buying group, where I suggested that we use this podcast to fill in the missing pieces from Keith's career path and find out what drew him back to this business. Keith Cottrell, welcome to the podcast and welcome back to the CI business. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Happy to be back. Still wondering if I should be back in residential, but that's just a tongue in cheek with the love-hate relationship that I have with this industry. But it's all good. I'm happy to be back, actually.
It keeps pulling us back in, or it never lets go. One of the two. It's a strange business. It's very incestuous, and somehow I think it's impossible to fully leave it behind, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like The Godfather, right? You think you're out, but you get dragged back in.
That's right. Well, I want to go through a lot of what you know brought you to it originally, and took you away, brought you back. But maybe just starting back when we first kind of connected, which was your Audio Advisors days with Jeff Hoover down in West Palm Beach. For a New York guy down there, I guess New Yorkers going down to Florida is nothing new, but that was according to your LinkedIn. You were there from 1998 to 2007. But one of the things that I really got a kick out of in your LinkedIn profile was your description of that time where you said, I held many positions while at Audio Advisors. Started out as an installer when I knew nothing about home automation nor AV. So I just thought that was really frank and honest, and I loved it. And so you eventually became this really respected project engineer for Jeff. And I think he really had a lot of faith in you kind of pulling all the project management details together for his company. Can you just tell the story of how you connected with Audio Advisors and how you go from no experience as an installer and knowing really anything about the tech side of things there in that company to being sort of a trusted person within the company?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. It started out I grew up in the elevator industry. My dad was a 3-decade elevator repair maintenance technician, I guess. We didn't use technicians for elevators back then, but that's what they're called today. And ironically, when I was in high school, I was thinking about business or accounting or finance as a career path or as a area of study for college. And then dad, knowing his son fully well, said, let me teach you a trade just in case. And, you know, God rest his soul, I told him to the day he died, you cursed me, right? Because you introduced me to technology and here I am. And that's kind of really where I got no, I didn't know it at the time, where I really got my entrance into automation, right? Relay logic and signal flow, et cetera. And then, long story short, I went into telecommunications at some point in time, was doing low voltage security, and it was a company I was working for in Long Island City, New York. I was working for their low voltage division, and they started to dabble in home automation. They sent me to Salt Lake City, Utah in 1997 to get trained in fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I mean, it was just, you know, for me, back then, the Jetsons on steroids, like this is what I want to do and so forth. So long story short, that company we were building, we were involved in a project in the town of Palm Beach, Florida. We were doing all of the automation ourselves, working with an electrician, and audio advisors had the AV contract. And in full retrospect, it was a pivoting moment for me because number one, you know, audio advisors, I was working for audio advisors customer, right? And
Yeah.
the sales rep that I was talking to from audio advisors respectfully said, I can't have this conversation with you unless I have your permission. I have the permission of your boss because he's my customer. So that was really my first, growing up moment. And I said, okay, I respect that, and let's do it. I'll have that conversation. So long story short, I didn't immediately join Audio Advisors, but in late '98, November 1998, the day after Thanksgiving, I packed up my a truck and drove down. I actually stayed at Jeff Hoover's house for 35 days, I think, or say 30 days. I was out of there by Christmas, and it was an eye-opening experience for me. Again, it was a culture shock. Kid growing up from the Bronx, go down and now start working, and I didn't start working in this industry, let alone knowing anything about home construction, right? Because
Okay.
like I said, I was working in commercial spaces up until that point in time. Um, like I said, I started out as an installer. They hired me primarily, I think, because of my phone and my voice and data experience. Already had phone system experience. I was dabbling in networking at the time, whatever that meant in the late '90s. And then they brought me inside to be a project engineer because I also had a security background. So I owned security and the voice data side of the engineering.
Mm.
And then as the company was growing, I think I was employee number 30. And then at the end of by the time I left Jeff, we were over 70 employees, right? So we went through many stages of growth. I think I even say this in my LinkedIn profile. I was one of the first project managers because at the time, project engineers owned the engineering plus the management of the projects, working with lead technicians, et cetera, and sometimes tag teaming the engineering and project management. And as we get bigger, we realized we needed dedicated project managers. And then my first um, management position was all of the PMs started reporting to me, which led to me being director of operations. I was director of system design at one point in time, and I think my last title was director of continuous improvement. Right, and the only thing continuous about audio advisors or the industry is change.
Right.
Right, so helping Jeff through the various stages of the growth that we were on fire, right, like the rest of the industry back then, and Jeff was already knee deep into his volunteerism with CEDIA. He was on the board of directors, started the Home Networking Council, became vice president, and eventually CEDIA president. And then, you know, I got sucked into the volunteer engine myself as one of the first deans of the project management school for CEDIA University. And that, for me, that volunteerism really helped me understand the depth and breadth of this industry and the opportunities, and really also help bring back some great ideas in terms of helping us with our growing pains at the time. And I loved it, and that's ultimately what drew me back in after my I think it was a 9-year hiatus before coming back to the industry almost 2 years ago now.
Well, you and I remember fondly had a dinner when you were in town working at CEDIA headquarters, doing some education, planning, probably, maybe even teaching some classes. And we went down to the legendary St. Elmo's for a steak dinner, and it was always just great to kind of reconnect with you at Expo and see you at the awards banquets and things like that. And so you got involved with this education side of things. It helps develop some programs for sure. And if you want to maybe dive a little deeper into that, and then we can also sort of trace your further career path after leaving West Palm. But what were some of those educational efforts that you did there, and what kinds of classes were you teaching at Expo?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. So here I am, a naive, uh, still relatively young in the industry, sitting in a room with seasoned veterans with decades of experience, and trying to figure out exactly, how do I fit in, and how do I find my voice. And it really helped develop me personally and professionally. So when the CEDIA University concept was was founded or born, if you will, in 2002, 20 years ago. Um, it was under the leadership and guidance of Todd Adams and Kenny Smith, um, and Ken Erdman and many others were involved at that point in time. But essentially, it was founded on the principle of 5 schools within the university, and so the PM school being one of them. That first year, we really didn't know what we were doing or what we wanted to offer. We just know we needed a more structured way of approaching the glaring need for education in the industry. And so really what we did was we polished up some of the existing seminars, if you will, and we said, well, this is a project management class, and maybe we can develop a course here or there, but we really weren't, in my opinion, that first year adding the value that was needed.
Mm.
And so after that first year of doing it and debriefing after Expo, I guess it was Expo 2002, we sat back and said, so what should this become? And here we are, as I like to say, the arrogant uh, nerds that we are in this space. Why are we trying to figure out what best practices are for project management when it already exists somewhere else, right?
Mm.
And so two things happened that were pivotal, not just for me personally, but also what we were about to do for project management. Number one, I think it was Eric Bodley recommended that we go and sit in on NSCA's boot camp. They had a 2-day boot camp on project management that was developed by some consultants, and so I sat through that course, and it was great. I said, this is everything that we need. It could become the anchor for our curriculum. And so Todd Adams and I negotiated the rights to rewrite that content for the
Mm.
residential space, and I was the guy that was tasked to rewrite the content. And I kept asking, because at that point in time I had no teaching experience. I hadn't even taught my first year, and I said, who's going to teach this boot camp? And Margaret Sheehan and others at times said, just keep doing what you're doing, keep your head down, we'll figure that out at the end. And I think it was like 30 days before Expo, they said, by the way, you're going to do this. I said, what? Right. I hadn't even taught a 90-day seminar at that point in time. You want me to be the anchor for a 2-day boot camp? Don't worry, we'll bring in a few others to help you. I think Eric Bodley was one of the instructors. I can't remember who the third one was, but I was a wreck. I mean, I was panicking and didn't sleep very well the night before of that launch, if you will. And within like 30 minutes, like I had found myself. Like, this is what I want to do, right? And that's still the retirement vision, right? Is whenever that comes, is I want to teach and write and train, when I slow down in life. But that was a very fulfilling discovery for me, and it led to then discovering, as we continue to dive into what are the best practices. In my research, I stumbled upon the Project Management Institute.
Mm.
And that's when I realized that there's already certification in place. At the time, there was only really one certification that the PMI was offering, which was the PMP, or Project Management Professional. So I think it was 2004, I went down that journey, for audio advisors and for myself. It was one of the hardest exams I'd ever taken, and then I passed it, obviously, and then I brought that philosophy into the Seed University concept as the foundation. If you think about the university concept of 100 to 400 level courses, we didn't really need to write any of the 100 level courses if we could, kind of mirror or somehow figure out how to pass on the fundamental knowledge that the PMI, you know, um, was already generating, right, or
Mhm.
had already generated, developed. And so that became sort of the backbone, if you will, of the project management university, or school within the university. And others like Jim Goss and Joe Wallace and Dean Callis, we all, Aaron Carmack. I'm just, the names are coming up. We just kept building on that content, and as we got into the 300-400 level courses, we would just, the art of home theater with, managing a home theater project with the whole fundamentals of what is a project, and what does it mean to deliver a project. And I've always said, that the PMI philosophy is really about, it's an abstract way of thinking about projects, but that's really what it is. It's about creating that mindset of what is a project, right? It's supposed to be temporary, despite what our industry thinks. Um, and they're unique aspects of it. And then what does it mean about, as I've evolved in my project management thinking, it's more than just what the project manager does. It's what does the department manager do? What does the organization do to enable success, et cetera. But beyond the project management classes that I was helping write, I was teaching some of those courses. I started doing some customer relation classes as well. And I think I even tag team a few classes with Jocelyn Stover on the business side as we started to see unique or similarities between business and PM content, customer relations, and so forth. So it was a you know professionally speaking, that 10-year period, before I left the industry, CEDIA really helped me figure out who I wanted to become. And remember, I got into this industry because I loved fast, right? It's not
Mhm.
even a product anymore. And it was the automation side and the technology. And I was a really good programmer at
Mm.
one point, and I was going to go down that path for Jeff and Audio Advisors. And I said, you know what? This is my niche. I'm really good at operations and project management, and it's kind of the career took off from there. Really, when I had that epiphany, I still, think back to that decision, of programming versus, management. There are most days I say I should have stayed in programming, you know, but it is what it is, right? It's just the art of the trials and tribulations of being a manager and a business leader. It's daunting, but so is delivering projects in our industry, right? So,
I think it's interesting. You point out the thing that we see so often, where we think that the CI business is just unique and there's no other business like it, which is complete nonsense. And that you figured out that there's this general sort of school of project management, this institute that exists. And yet, as much as I agree that there are broader business techniques and things that apply to our industry that should be kept in mind at all times, the idea of what a general project is without it being linked to our industry, the PMI model, this abstract concept of the project, it still kind of blows my mind a little bit to think about going into this thing and just learning this general topic of project management and then making it apply to what you do specific to the custom integrator industry. So did you feel it right away, like when you went to the institute, like, oh, this does apply to us, this is exactly what we need to do? Or was
I
it
would.
like, well, our industry is kind of different, I don't know if this is always going to work?
Um, Again, I was still relatively wet behind the ears, right? So instinctively, my gut told me this is what we needed, right?
Okay,
And
yeah, yeah.
and when I brought it back to, my peers in CD University, and to Todd, who was still running CD University at the time, for Expo specifically, it started to click. And
Okay.
we had, board members in many of our think tank sessions, and it just was a natural sense because I wouldn't say we were desperate, but we were desperate for content, right? And we
Right.
needed to really understand, like, what is it that we're trying to create here. And the difficulty factor of what CEDIA University, even still today for CEDIA, is that, you know there's such a wide array of organizational size and structure,
Yeah.
right? And so what is a best practice for our industry when you've got 5-man companies and
Hmm.
70 to 100-man companies, right? But at the end of the day, the principles are still the same, right? I mean, if you ever read the book, the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, you got to sell, you got to deliver, and you got to, have the administrative, backbone to make sure that you're collecting, invoicing, et cetera, paying people. But it just boils down to that grassroots, and not overcomplicating things. And so I would say, probably a year into blending the PMI philosophy into the curriculum, it really started to make sense. Like we were on to something. It wasn't a popular opinion because there were many people who would think, this doesn't apply to us.
Hmm.
We're a much different industry. Our projects are different. What makes them so different besides the clients and the technology, right? It's no different than what IT guys are doing, or commercial AV guys are doing. And so a project is a project is a project at the end of the day. There are very unique aspects to the projects that we deal with, but at the fundamental grassroots level, it's just a project.
Well, after the break, we will continue our conversation with Keith Cottrell.
Do you want superior smart home automation at a great value? Shelly Wi-Fi relays by Alterco Robotics cover DC to line voltage, allowing you to control lights, outlets, appliances, garage doors, pumps, and much more. There are Shelly sensors and power measurement devices to help you measure temperature, humidity, lux, or motion, and electrical consumption from single wire to 3-phase with neutral. You can use Shelly with a licensed driver for Control 4, Elon, or other premium systems, as well as your customer's existing hub, voice assistant, or any platform that accepts REST, MQTT, or CoAP. Shelly can make IoT very easy. Available now at Blackwire, City Electric Supply, and Worthington, or at shellyusa.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Keith Cottrell, the Vice President of Operations at Electronic Environments New York. And Keith, what you did with that education with PMI is kind of the foundation of your series of columns that you did for residential systems. Am I correct in remembering that you kind of use some of those principles and how they apply to the industry as
It-
your basis for that?
yeah, there was a blend, but the core of those columns at the time was on this concept of employee architecture, right? And so when I left Audio Advisors in 2007 for personal reasons, I moved back to New York. I was doing some soul searching at the time on a personal level, and I decided, because I had the training bug, right, having gone through that at that point in time 5, 6, 7 years of volunteering for CEDIA and talking to other trainers in the space. Again, Todd Adams, Mario Leone, and Joel Rosenblatt, and we're and others, Steve First. What could we help the industry with in terms of education and training? And what I quickly recognized is that most of the training programs outside of the business consulting programs that guys like Steve First were offering, all of the training, third party training that was being offered was on the technical side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think most organizations in any industry go there first because it's the X's and O's of delivering whatever the products and services you are, but you overlook the professional development side and creating well-rounded individuals. And you know back then we would take the best lead technicians and turn them into project managers because we had no other depth, had no other pool of talent to dive into. But it failed more times than not because a good lead technician is good because he's focused, right? But now you bring him over to project management. It's the people skills, the financial skills. It's you have to be a pseudo general manager because you got to speak multiple language: the finance, the client, the architect, right? And so the professional development side, and then I recognize this through the CD University um, journey as well. It's we were missing a little bit there in terms of what does it mean to develop individuals, employee intelligence and communication skills, time management skills, and other similar type workshops. So that was really the essence of the columns that I started to write, with a blend towards the project management as well, kind of putting my spin on it. And so I went into that consultant journey myself for a while, and um, I think I formed my corporation in early 2008, and it was really Expo 2007 that really gave me clarity. I'd already left Jeff. I was you know unemployed for the latter half of 2007 out of choice.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to some manufacturers in the space, and so long story short, it was conversations that I had at Expo 2007 that really gave me the aha moment of what I wanted to make a run at becoming a trainer. And I was doing freelance project management. I was helping Todd Adams with some of the things that he was doing with DI Partner. Um, and but within a month or two of founding my corporation, the recession hit in 2008. Right.
Yeah.
So all of the warm leads, the first thing to go from corporate budgets when times get rough, unfortunately, is training. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, all right, we'll wing it, we'll figure this out. And I was trying to leverage the space or the industry that I was already in. So my target market were CD integrators, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was also reaching out to some other similar trades that I had known or been a part of through the years. But primarily, I was trying to get get this idea of employee architecture going for the CEDIA space, and even I try to do some stuff for NSCA as well. But all of those warm leads went frigid, right? And so I luckily had already filled my sales pipeline, so I was busy doing the work. It was a one-man show. I wasn't selling. I had a bunch of freelance gigs. I was writing for Resi. I was doing some other things, and I had a night job, right? Because I wasn't killing it as a consultant, right? And so ironically, I went back to the elevator company that gave me my start, my first real job in technology in high school, and I working out of my house. So I created the work from home thing a long time ago. I
Mm.
was a dispatcher for after hours service, right? I was just doing tech support and you know working on emergency service, and so at night, in between calls, I was able to kind of do some writing and try to figure out where the next sale was coming from, and so, but I still look back at some of those articles. I think I shared I think actually a few of them are actually within my LinkedIn profile. It was good, and I appreciated the opportunity that you had afforded me back then. I knew it wasn't a your typical column for that magazine at the time,
Hmm.
but it was a win-win, and I've always appreciated that. So I thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And it was a mutually beneficial situation. And I always said that early on, especially with my editor role, I needed to find people that really did the work out there that could be the voices in the magazine. Because who is this kid with a journalism degree? All I did was put the pieces together and try to find the good voices. So you were one of those very well-respected voices that really helped us have some credibility there, and I appreciate that as well.
I appreciate
You did end up working back in the integration space after you came back to New York. For a time you were there at EDG, correct?
it. Yeah, so I had met Bob Gullo, the owner of EDG, through HTSA, and also through at the time Speaker Craft and Jeremy Burkhart. They were doing their own management conference called the Gig.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first time I had met Bob was at one of those events. Long story short, when I had already decided to move from Florida back to New York, I put the word out, right, that I was looking. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and that's when the interviews from manufacturers started coming. I actually had opportunities to, take part ownership in some companies, but they were in Chicago or Colorado or San Francisco. I said, guys, I'm going to New York. I mean, if you want to do something in New York, let's have a conversation. But long story short, Bob had reached out to me, was struggling with the service side of his business at the time. And I immediately said, no, thank you. I don't want to be a service manager. I'm past that, at this point in my career. And he made it clear to me that it was an executive position and he wanted to recreate what he was doing, and we did that, and so but again, 3 years into it, it wasn't something that I really wanted to do anymore, and Bob was thinking about making some changes to the company, so we parted ways, which was the next soul searching that I went through, and then that's how I landed on the manufacturing side in a completely different industry, back in security, which is part of my roots, right? So which was another interesting journey, being outside of the delivery side of projects and working for a company that was supporting integrators. So I was able to bring my integrator mindset to help coach and develop my tech support agents. So I was hired to run tech support for the Americas, so North, Central, Latin America, and then we made some changes within the organization. I had global responsibilities. So I started traveling, around the world to our various sales and support offices, and building this 24 by 5 support model. But I always had that integrator mindset, and the manufacturer that I worked for was a software first video management system, if you will, and we had a unique integration division that would write code to integrate third party software with the video management software, so that it was really this um, uh, security operating center, right? So gunshot detection and license plate recognition. But for me, it just resonated, the whole integration concept, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was able to get involved at the R&D level, not from a technical perspective, just kind of talk through the process of what it means to integrate systems, and what does it mean then to support our growing integrators from a project delivery perspective, right? So I was able to bring my unique experience from a very crazy industry, um, as our business on the manufacturing side was growing, and so it just kind of came full circle. And I also learned a lot about business, and I saw very quickly the similarities between a real business and what we called business on the integration side at the time. But again, a project is a project, a business is a business. You struggle with the same challenges, and they're just smaller or bigger depending on your perspective and what side of the fence you're looking at it from. But so that's kind of how I stepped aside from the industry for a while, and then we got acquired, became part of a public organization, and for a while that was great. And then I quickly realized my growth was getting stagnated because I was
Mm.
much part of this large organization. And be quite frank, I missed integration, right? And I had stayed connected with my friends in the CEDIA space thanks to Facebook and LinkedIn. Um, Always had the corner, my peripheral vision on it. But when I came back to integration, was to be a general manager in the commercial side of AV, running a branch in New Jersey for a company that had 3 offices. And I was happy. It was my dream
Mm.
job, because I had P&L responsibilities, and I was, really at that general manager's seat. I can apply all of the things that I learned from being my dad's apprentice, right? Back in high school to coming full circle to a business leader. Um, and then the pandemic hit, and I wasn't looking to leave the company, but as we all know, in the late 2020, residential just was lit on fire again because of the whole work from home and educate from home concept. And there were a lot of companies within our current market, here in New York, New Jersey, that, you know, friends in the industry kept dropping my name, and I kept saying, I really don't want to do this. Right.
Mm.
I'm happy where I am. I know it's a struggle. I know the commercial side of it's going to be slower to rebound, but I was really happy. But out of respect to those friends that were dropping my name, I took some phone calls, and that's how I came back in January of 21 is when I joined Electronic Environments.
And what was it about that particular opportunity at Electronic Environment specifically that you said, okay, this is the one I'm gonna take?
There's a couple of things. The leadership, right? Kim Michaels is a very successful entrepreneur, in a very difficult market. Right, he'd been in business now 35 years, and I remember during my interview 2 years ago, he said I didn't even have a website until 5 years ago, and the only reason I did that is because I was told I needed to, which was kind of funny because I said during my interview, I said I kind of sort of have heard electronic environments before, but during my teaching from CEDIA, I knew who all of the big companies were, the more successful ones, and they were just flying beneath the radar in every sense of the word, right? So it was Kim Michaels. It was some of the things we talked about on the entrepreneurial side of, we have this concept that we call developing a business within a business, right? You're in business 35 years, and you know those that are getting started today never really looked far enough ahead to understand what the service model needs to be when you're in business that long, especially with the size of the projects that folks like Electronic Environments, get into, and EDG Audio Advisors and some of the other bigger players. Service becomes a really, really big thing.
Yeah.
And that was the essence of what I tried to help Bob with, and took a lot of learning there in terms of figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Our clientele is demanding, right? And so it's not just about, you know, the break fix support, but it's about customer service and customer relations, and you know, carrying forth the brand that the company needs to be on the service model, from technicians to the folks answering the phones, and the nuances of invoicing, right, and how quickly you answer the phone. But then there's the other side to it is, again, if you're successful enough to stay in business for 3+ decades, and you've done the right thing by your clients through that point in time, at some point, maybe 3 or 4 times in that 3+ decade time span, they need to upgrade their technology.
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that we as an industry struggle with is that we're very reactive to that, right? We wait till it breaks, or we wait till they call us and say, "Hey, I heard about this new, widget, right? I want that new 4K TV." Then we go in there and we just give them a 4K TV instead of actually pausing and saying, "Let's look at this as an opportunity to." I'm sure their lifestyle has changed, right? Sure,
Hmm.
they're, maybe they're empty nesters now, and they're probably not using 80% of the technology you gave them 10, 20 years ago. So this business within a business concept really appealed to the entrepreneur in me, um, to try to build this small to medium integration company within this larger umbrella, right?
Okay.
And then, on the, with the other side to it is, like anybody else that's gone through the pandemic, and in this industry in general, right? There's the essence of, have you paid enough attention to what has changed about your business, and your your staffing plan, your approach to projects. We're doing really, really large jobs, right? Where maybe 5 years ago, Electronic Environments was doing one seven-figure job a year, right? I've got 6 or 7 in my pipeline right now, right? And they all seem to hit at the same time, like every other project, right, that you deal with. So there was that appeal to helping, right size the organization, not from the standpoint of staffing, although there's that aspect of it in terms of balancing talent and so forth and trying to be all things to all people. But what's the approach that's needed to really deal with these large complex projects that go on for years, right? And we dabbled in some of those types of projects when I was with Jeff.
Mhm.
We actually had a special projects division, that was just focused on those types of projects. But now it's mainstream, right? It's just kind of part of our what we call our main track business, and we got to navigate through that. And as the larger projects get larger, the threshold for what is considered a small fast track project gets larger,
Mm.
and then it creates this bigger gray area in between of the medium. Right? What's medium for us is really large for an integrator that's just getting started. So, I'm kind of harnessing everything that I've learned through this 25 plus, actually, wow, 35 plus year journey in technology, from understanding what it's like to be in the field and the trials and tribulations of poor planning and how that impacts the field, and then having to, you know make sure you're doing the right thing by your clients no matter what the engagement is. And what I learned, leaving the integration space for a while, and kind of understanding the manufacturer side. It's kind of where I'm at right now, just trying to apply that here at Electronic Environments. And the other thing also that was appealing for me, like I said, I was drawn back a lot because of the professional community, the network, right? My buddies, right? Like you, like others from the CEDIA University space. And Kim Michaels is a founder. I think many in the industry have heard of the Guild, which
Oh
is,
yeah.
um, there's 14 similar companies from across the country, right? The best of the best, as we like to say arrogantly. But it's a it's a network of like-minded companies that are struggling and or succeeding in the same areas. And so part of that aspect of being part of an even tighter community, right, for brainstorming and mind share. And I just love that stuff. I eat it up, right? Put me in a room with 5 consultants and I'll be there for a week, right? And I might know half of what they're talking about, but I just want to see and hear, and whether it's validation or just learning something new, I'm going to shut up and listen, although you probably can't see that right now. But at the end of the day, I love it, right? And so
Yeah.
that, coupled with who Electronic Environments is and wants to become, the entrepreneurial side, the helping develop, uh, not just, people, but also emerging leaders, right? I'm
Hmm.
at the point now where I can coach and guide and help folks that are new to management or supervisor roles to what does it mean to make that pivot. And so it's a combination of things. But like the Godfather, I got dragged right back in, and it took a lot for me to make the decision because like I said, I was happy. I had what I considered my dream job, but the writing was on the wall. And unfortunately, for my former colleagues, 6 months after I joined Electronic Environments, that company that I left got acquired. So,
Mm.
I must have, it's just the nature of the cycles. There's some common themes here, right? About growing pains and mergers and acquisitions, and just the the trials and tribulations of life, whether it's personal or professional. So here I am.
Well, I think it's interesting that all through these experiences that you never really sought out to be an owner of your own company, that you did see yourself as more of the guy that gets things done within the company, maybe on that management side, knowing who you are as with your skill set, maybe, and understanding that everyone has their, you want a career path, but you also don't want to go into an area where it's just a personality conflict with who you are in your leadership style or your ability to, think clearly through something. So is that what it is? You just really know who you are, and you know that you're not the owner. You don't want to have that full responsibility. You want to have the level just below that, perhaps.
The desire is there. Um, I, capital obviously is a big thing.
Right.
It is the responsibility of it's not just your family at that point in time. There's multiple families to feed, whether it's, three of you or 100 of you. Um, I envision myself, maybe, you know, a, a fractional COO or CEO when I go into retirement, right? But I'm only 50, so I got some time there. But in fact, it's funny. I mentioned, interviewing with a bunch of manufacturers when I left Jeff. When Jeremy Burkhart was still at Speakercraft, I came very close to going to work for him,
Mm.
and he asked me the exact same question. He goes, "When are you going to step up and own it?" The answer at the time was, I don't have your money, right? But if I hit the lotto, this week, you know, Kim might get upset when I say this, but I would probably try to go buy a company. I don't know if I would buy a company in Resi because, only because of profit margins and so forth, but I would consider myself, or I have aspirations of becoming a serial entrepreneur if I actually had the bankroll, right? And it
Hmm.
wouldn't just be an integration business. It would, all of the varying interests that I have, whether it's buying a training company or, whatever, anything that's going to, appeal to my entrepreneurial instincts. When I started the consulting company back in 2008, it was the third corporation I had actually opened.
Mm.
When I was uh, in college, or I should say, pursuing my associates at DeVry, I actually founded a company that was a hybrid. It was a telecommunications company, and the other side of it was digging into the roots of my dad's career. My uncle was in the elevator industry at the time, and so elevator testing, elevator inspecting. So I have wanted to be. I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I've
Hmm.
tried it a few times. Like most entrepreneurs, I tried multi-level marketing. I got sucked into that at one point in my life. But so it's there. The desire is there. Timing, bankroll, uh, responsibilities at home, right? And I'm not a salesman. That's the other side of it, right?
Ah.
That's the thing that I quickly realized when I went through the consulting side of it is I'm not a natural salesman, right? I was a good salesman as a project manager because the relationship was already there, and I wrote really big change orders because I created trust, but the door had already been opened,
Mm.
right? So that side of me I recognize as a weakness, right? So I would need a, either existing company or, a partner to really do it. But here I am, right? It's a capital and timing of life more than anything else. But I have tried.
Well, I think it's great that you ended up back where we can reconnect, and that's a selfish reason for being happy about that. But also, Kim Michaels is a very respected business leader in our industry, and I don't know him well, but I've crossed paths with him at HTSA meetings, and he always seems to be very, you know, engaged with everyone, and everyone really respects who he is. So that's great to hear that you're working together, and this idea of the company within the company concept is really intriguing as well. So I look forward to continuing to kind of check in with you, see how that's going, and learn more about it as it evolves. I know we've talked for a long time, so we could keep talking forever, but respect your time. So thank you again for joining us today.
It's been fun. I really appreciate you connecting, and it's amazing what happens over lunch, right? And just reconnecting. So I appreciate again, once again, the opportunity to share what's on my mind.
Keith Cottrell is Vice President of Operations at Electronic Environments New York. You can learn more about his company at eeny.net and track down Keith personally on LinkedIn. That wraps up today's show. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast on your preferred platform and consider rating or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist to Arc Residential Tech.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.